Welcome to Lawyers Without Billboards, where we break down family law and other areas of the law. No gimmicks, no legal jargon, just real, unfiltered talk from real lawyers. Join your hosts, Steve, Patty, Jimmy, and Alexa, partners at Shewmaker Lewis, a law firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Every episode, they tackle the legal questions that matter most: divorce, custody, child support, alimony, and everything in between. They'll pull back the curtain to give you real insights on what happens inside the courtroom and beyond.
Welcome back to Lawyers Without Billboards, hosted by Shewmaker Lewis. That's Jimmy Lewis, Alexa Lewis, Patty Shewmaker, and yours truly, Steve Shewmaker. The topic today is pots and pans, dividing the stuff at the house in a divorce. Let me tell you something, y'all. I wrote the outline for this that I'm working off of here, and I thought this would be a relatively short topic, and I was wrong. So, without further ado, let's get into this. We've talked previously about property, what's separate property, what's marital property, what's gifted, inherited property, but the stuff inside the house, the four corners of the house generally.
Yeah, it's not always just within the house, right?
Right. So let me pose a few questions to y'all. I don't want to do all the talking, but let me get y'all going with the questions I've written. There's a myriad, a legion of different types of marital property. What are the
such fancy
Mr.
words.
Big Word
Hey,
over here.
big time. I'm erudite. If I was
boy.
a Greek goddess of knowledge, I would be erudite.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, real quick. What are the broad?
You mean Aphrodite?
That's the goddess
Hey,
of
I
love.
prefer my word. Okay, what are the?
Come on, man.
Are you done?
Yes.
What are the broad categories of property in a divorce? The broad categories. Give me
Like
some.
House?
Real property?
Okay, real property is one, which we're not going to talk
Bank
about today.
accounts,
Bank
investment
accounts was my
accounts,
third one.
retirement
Re-
accounts.
retirements was my second one. Cash.
Cars.
Cars, boats, airplanes, and helicopters. Good. And-
Helicopters.
ATVs. Golf
right, motor
carts.
vehicles.
Wait,
And
have you had a divorce with a helicopter?
I'll never tell because I want to talk today about what I call Go ahead.
Well, wait. Remember
Yes.
that one that we had not that long ago that they had a remarkably extensive liquor collection, like a lot. of
You're getting ahead
collector.
of me. You're getting ahead of me.
We've had
okay?
one of those, too.
We are now going to transition away from boats, cars, and houses and 401ks. We're going to get to what I call the Rodney Dangerfield of marital property. Remember Rodney Dangerfield,
Yes.
the comedian
Yeah.
from the 70s? I don't get no respect.
Yes.
Judges will absolutely say, come on in my courtroom, let's talk about that house, that 401k, that pension. But now we're going to talk about what my mentor into family law, Catherine Lynch, called the pots and pans. I wrote it down because I remember her saying it to me as she was training me. She said, Steve, do not ever, 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 never, never, ever take pots and pans to the judge. So pots and pans is a generic term. She's not the only one who uses that term. But it pots and pans typically encompasses what?
The stuff.
What's the stuff?
Oh my God.
Furniture.
Furniture. Okay, what else?
Clothing, furniture.
What else?
Fixtures.
Okay.
Your
Jimmy mentioned liquor.
liquor, yard equipment, tools.
Coin collection.
Okay.
The
Coin
stamp
collection. Okay, let me
I
stop
put
you
jewelry
there.
in a little bit separate
Oh,
category.
the baseball card collection. I had that.
Well, you all are getting ahead of me. Let me tell you what.
I had one not that long ago. They had a pretty extensive firearm collection of like some collector pieces that were pretty pricey.
In preparation for this segment, I called some friends. I called Phil McCurdy. Here we go. Phil McCurdy. And I said, hey, Phil. And I told him what I was looking at. And I said, what's the strangest pots and pans you've ever had to work on? And he said, a coin collection. Good. I have Paul Simon, who, by the way, said, you're doing a podcast? He says, great. More white people doing a podcast. Thank you, Paul Simon.
Right.
Paul Simon, I said, what is it? He says,
Haters gonna hate.
haters gotta hate. He said a picture of an owl. Louis Tesser said...
Painting or a picture?
A picture.
Okay.
It may have been a painting.
was gonna
Louis
say.
Tesser said a collection of brass Indian gods, brass figurines of Indian
Sure.
gods. And he said to me, Steve, you never go to the property to divide it if you are smart. More about that later.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Ural Glanville, I called him last night. This was one of my favorites. He says, I had a divorce case come in front of me where the wife wanted the husband's Harvard Medical School diplomas. And he looked at her, and this was his quote to me last night on the phone. He looked at her and said, really? And then he said, nah, that ain't happening.
No.
Okay. Judge Alice Benton, Fulton County?
I have to
I need to know the why.
No, I know the why.
I don't know the why.
Yeah, all of us know the
Wow.
why. I have to know who her attorney was, who
That
actually
Fair,
let her
fair.
say that on the stand.
Well,
Yeah.
you need to. Well, that's a whole other topic about client control. But you and I will call Judge Glanville and ask him. Judge Alice Benton, also on the Fulton County bench, I posed a question to her last night, and she said to me, "Steve, a vacuum cleaner." My response was, "A Dyson?"
Right.
She said, "No,
Not even a Dyson?
no, no."
A shark, maybe? An Electrolux?
we have another story about a Dyson.
I asked, yes,
Oh,
we do.
yeah, we do.
I asked a Lawrenceville attorney that we know, Mike O'Hagan, and I can't even say on here what he said, so we're going to move on.
Awesome.
So I'm going to ask the group, what is the strangest pots and pans? Remember, again, pots and pans is the generic term for personal items. What is the strangest pots and pans you've had to deal with but not take to court? You worked it out before court.
Not take to court.
Go ahead.
Mine was the baseball card
Baseball
collection.
card collection. How did you all resolve it, Patty?
We ended up agreeing, but at some point we were talking about actually having somebody go through the baseball cards and have them appraised.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you
I
end
mean-
up doing it?
No, but there is an appraiser for just about anything. But
Alexa, how about you?
I wouldn't call it strange, but the liquor collection.
Yeah. Was that
Yeah.
the case you and I had
Yes,
together
it
where we
was.
had like Pappy?
With,
and-
with Kevin Rubin, yes, it was.
Yeah, we had all this liquor, and I was
wow.
like, I'll take
Like,
payment.
how
in
do
a-
we get in on that?
I'll take
right.
payment in a bottle of Pappy, but we didn't get it.
We didn't
okay,
get
so
it.
you and I had that together.
Yep.
Jimmy, what have you had?
You know, on a separate podcast episode, I talked about that one mediation where they had all these figurines
The porcelain
that were
figurines.
worth not that much that they just wanted to argue about.
Action figures.
No, these
Okay.
were porcelain.
Figurines.
Okay.
Were they the little angel ones?
Somewhat
Okay.
like they
With
weren't
the big eyes.
They weren't precious moments, but they were. but they
Why
were,
do you know that that's what I was talking about? Why do you know the name?
Because I had thought about this the other day in preparation for these podcasts.
I liked his precious moment.
we don't
No.
own a single precious
No.
moment, okay? Not one.
that you know of.
Those would be good target practice. I'm
Fair.
going to say probably the most interesting was they had an extensive firearm collection with a handful of collector pieces.
It's right up your alley.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, next question. So how many times have you litigated in court? So not mediation, not settlement, but either court or arbitration. How many times have you litigated personal property division?
0.
Okay, good for you. A plus
Yeah,
for Alexa.
0.
She followed my mentor's advice. Jimmy, how many times for you?
Literally 0.
Good for you, Patty.
A couple of times.
Well, I must
God,
lead.
Patty, why are you so
I mean-
litigious?
Okay, what were they?
Well, you and I had the case together.
Don't say that one. I'm going to get to that one next. Other than that, how many? How many others?
Probably one or two where we had the personal property list and we were down to 3 or 4 items that they were fighting over.
All right. I'm going to give you. I lead the firm in, I guess, shittiness because I have 3, and I know my mentor would be very upset with me. The first one was in Cherokee County in front of Judge Cannon. It was 2 landscape paintings. And I will tell you that we won those. We had to take them to Judge Cannon, and we won, but we didn't win on the merits of the paintings. We won because have you ever had an opposing party who's done or said something, but you couldn't prove it? So my technique is I'll go in I'll pretend it's Jimmy. I said to this man, I said, sir, he was the guy I wasn't representing. I said, sir, it's alleged, I'm certain you would deny, that you ever walked into a room and said to my client from several feet away, I can smell your vagina. And
my
on
God.
the stand, he goes, yeah, and he kind of chuckled, he goes, yeah, I've said that a couple times.
Oh, my God.
And I won. You won the case there because the judge just has to hate him. So I won that one. I'm going to come back to the pots and pans that
God.
Patty's thinking of, and then the third one was fairly recently. We, Steve Riley in Lawrenceville, and I had a married couple, married a long time, like almost 40 years, and they collectively collected 1970s and 80s era stereo components.
They were hoarders.
Hoarders and 1970s and 80s era computers. And they swore this stuff was worth a lot of money.
Doubt it.
And I mean rooms stacked high. And this is a 3-story house in
my
Gwinnett
God.
County. And there was so much of it and so much disagreement about it that we had to hire Deborah Hale as the arbitrator to go to the house and spent, I think it was a day and a half, I mean, thousands of dollars arguing over stuff that I don't think was worth anything. Yes,
That's
sir.
what I was going to clarify was that the attorney's fees and arbitration fees were thousands of dollars.
Yes.
The computer
stuff.
components and the stereo components were not.
Probably
Correct.
not.
But now we're going to tell the king daddy of all pots and pan stories, and it wasn't because we're bad attorneys. It was forced upon me and Patty. Okay? Years ago, in DeKalb County, two university PhD
can't see it on
professors were
There we
were
go.
arguing, and the husband we didn't represent filed a contempt action against the wife, and he said the divorce decree says I'm supposed to get the gourmet. I'm not the gourmet, the cookware.
A set of pots and
So,
pans.
so when you talk about pots and pans, it was quite actually pots and pans. So he filed a contempt motion against the wife who we represented, and Judge Mark Anthony Scott, great guy, no longer on
No
the
longer on
DeKalb
the
County
bench.
Superior Court. I think he's in senior status now.
We miss him.
Yeah, he was the judge, and we came in on the contempt. And the other attorney, who I like, but I don't think we need to name his name, he came in like Santa Claus with this big blue bag clanking of pots and pans.
Through security.
And through security. And in court, he starts pulling these out, and I start razzing him. I said, Judge, he's doing things that the court reporter can't take down. What is he doing with these pots and pans? Because he brought in literally the cheapest set of garage sale junk that our client had given him. And then he said, this isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting the gourmet stuff. So then this attorney starts lining the pieces up on the bar between the courtroom and the jury, which is the photo I have here, the picture. And I start grilling this guy, and I said, what is this? I said, is this a bread box? No. Is this athletic equipment? No. Is this cookware? He says, yes. I said, read the settlement agreement. He says, cookware. I said, we're done. I rest my case. Judge threw it out, and we won it. Mm-hmm. But we actually had to litigate pots and pans, not because we're bad attorneys, but because it was forced upon us, right? So now we have a picture of it that we hang in our law office of the actual pots and pans.
Can I tell you the weirdest story I've ever had of dealing with the personal property?
Please.
So I had a case out in Carroll County, way out in Carrollton.
West Georgia.
West Georgia. And we reached a settlement agreement. Everything was agreed upon. All of her stuff was agreed upon and everything. But my client had to go back to the house to get her stuff. And she really wanted me there, which I was like, you understand, like I have to bill you for this, right? And she said,
I remember
absolutely.
this. I remember it vaguely, yeah.
I totally understand. I have to pay your hourly rate for this. I said, okay. So I've got to drive separate day all the way out to this house in Carrollton to help her make sure she's getting her stuff, of which included the ashes of many of her cats.
Oh.
They were on the shelf in little, sorry, ads, in little containers. They were about the size
Creepy.
of Patty's Coke can.
That's creepy.
It's like fast forwarding into the
containers.
future for her.
That's creepy. All right.
We're not divorcing, damn it.
My weirdest personal
just meant you
property
and
story
cat
was I had Judge Manning in Fulton County actually appoint me.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it was.
a good
I guess it
story.
was kind of like a special master. Appoint me to go to these parties' houses because they had two houses, one here and one in Asheville, and inventory all of the property at my hourly rate. I think I billed them like $10,000 to inventory.
Because you had to drive.
Well, you had to go to North Carolina.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I had to go up.
Did you stay at the Broadmoor?
No, I went up
The
the back.
Biltmore?
That's what I meant to say.
That too.
The
No,
Motel
I
6.
I went up and back in the same day, but I mean, I went through room by room and did a written inventory and a video inventory of every room and everything.
What was the weirdest thing you found during this inventory, Patty?
Very awkwardly, the sex toys in the nightstands.
Solid.
At
You know,
both residences.
so I have another attorney friend of ours who I won't name has actually litigated the sex toys. And all I could think is, wouldn't you just buy new toys?
Yeah, throw
Like,
them away.
why
start
don't you
over.
just trash them and start over? Why are we fighting over these
Well, let me
things?
ask you this for the benefit of not only the potential clients, but also the other attorneys out there. Will judges in Georgia divide the pots and pans in a divorce trial?
If they
Yeah,
have
if they
to.
have
If they have
to.
If they have
Yes,
to.
if they have to. Do they have any alternatives that they prefer? Jimmy?
Not to.
Well, that parties work it out.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
I've had judges send people out into the hallway. You guys go out and try to work it out, and only come back to see me if you
Okay,
can.
so
Yeah.
one way is they'll say, look, y'all, I don't want to do this. Go out in the hallway and work it out. That's most common, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Jimmy?
I would like you, after this little segment, because it piggybacks perfectly on what you're saying and judges wanting or having to make that decision,
Yeah.
a DeKalb State Court judge who witnessed that event. Your story of that.
Judge Lopez.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. I'll finish this up.
Yeah,
but
you gotta
real
tell it
quick,
after.
Yeah.
I'll do that. So, yes, we agree that judges will do this if they're forced to, and one of their go-tos is tell everybody to go out in the hallway, work it
Yeah.
out. What about, let's talk specifically about family photos or piles of photos and stuff like that. What do judges like to do oftentimes with that?
Whoever
Here,
has
you
them.
need to give it to them in digital form.
Yeah, or you have to
Or-
make copies and you have to pay for it.
Or I've also seen, and not just with photos, other stuff like maybe there's a collection of something
Yeah.
where the judge will say, "Okay, Jimmy, you make 2 piles. Alexa, you get to pick the first pile."
Right. So if Jimmy puts all the good stuff in one pile, he's got a 50% chance of losing that
Yeah,
stuff.
the pile method.
I wrote that
Well-
down here because that's one that is more old school before a lot of digital stuff that I've seen judges do. I'm going to line through that. Now, will judges ever hear the equities, the fairness arguments of property, especially if it's unique property?
It
Yeah.
has to be unique.
Yep.
It has to be. I mean, if we were to start arguing the equities of cheap cookware, the judge probably would have gotten really irritated. You know, I've had other attorneys say it's the Target rule, right? We're not gonna litigate anything that you can buy at Target.
Right.
Exactly. And you're a bad attorney if you go into court arguing about stuff that you could buy at Target. And the pots and pans was forced on us. The art I told you about was more advanced than that. Yes,
Look,
sir.
I told a client the other day when we were talking about this, I said, for God's sakes, man, go to Costco and buy a new set of pans.
Right. Because you spend more money talking to me about it.
Oh, yeah.
But if
And
you have to do it.
he was like, actually, you know what? These ones are kind of beat to hell.
But
anyway.
if you have to do it, I would recommend other attorneys pull out the 1993 child custody factors and the factors behind equitable division of property or some of the case law and make yourself a checklist and say, why should my client get this over the other party? Let's look at what factors help.
It's in the best interest of the
best
Le
interest,
Creuset pan
Of the
that
file.
I
To
have
stay
it.
with me, yeah.
Well, you can make fun of me, but, I would have some sort of a structure if I was going to make that argument in front of a judge.
Well,
Am I
I think,
wrong?
no, and I think...
You want to make fun of me. I
I
get it.
do. I mean, I've washed the pans more. I've taken care of them more. I have
Alexa-
more of an emotional attachment to the pans.
there you go.
Alexa's not going to take care of my dirt bike.
No, that's absolutely
I'll
true.
tell you right now, Patty can have the washer and dryer because I don't even think I know how to work
You
that.
probably don't even have to turn it on. But for example, like collector's edition firearms, like you take that to a judge if you're fighting over something like that because they have value.
Do you bring in expert witnesses?
Possibly.
Yeah, maybe.
Could.
Depends on the value of what you're talking
That's
about.
right.
Yep.
That's right. All right, let's switch this around. What is the best advice that you can give your client? You're in your office talking to your dumbass client who wants to go litigate pots and pans. What is the best advice we can give anyone in a divorce when it comes to dividing the pots and pans?
We're not going to litigate anything that you can buy at Target.
Buy new
the
shit.
Target rule.
Yeah.
Don't take it to the judge. Do it yourself because the judge might cut it in half, right? Little known story. I think Patty knows this. Y'all might not know this. I got divorced in 1996.
We knew that.
Okay. And my now ex-wife and I went room by room in our house in Texas, and I think we flipped a coin, and the person who won the coin toss got the first pick of an item, and we did that all through the house. And I've told people in the past, do that.
I've
Yeah.
put that into agreements.
Not
The Steve
everybody.
rule?
Not everybody's that amicable.
True.
Right. Okay, next question. As attorneys, this is more for attorneys listening. As attorneys, how do we avoid pitfalls regarding the division of pots and pans? What have our past experiences and mistakes taught us about dividing them? And this is more so in the agreements we write. Talk to me about that.
Well, if we're going to just put in something along the lines of they'll divide everything to their mutual satisfaction, that's not helpful for parties if they can't reach an agreement.
That's a
So-
recipe for a lot of phone calls.
Absolutely. So putting in a mechanism.
One of my
for-
favorites is if one party's moved out, I look at that party at mediation or whatnot and say, have you taken everything you want out of that house? If they say yes, then I say, okay, look me in my eye. I'm going to write that this agreement says that you've already taken everything you want and everything that you left is hers
Yep.
and everything you took is yours and you're both going to agree to that. And if they say, well, then I say, okay, pull out a piece of paper right now and write down everything that she has that you want. I'm going to take that list to the other side, and I'm going to say, highlight what you object to him getting.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, because that's enforceable, because we reached an agreement. Now, if you're at mediation and the parties are still living together, what do you do?
I sometimes do the list.
The list, yeah.
Or you put in a mechanism, say, we're either going to work it out, and if they can't work it out, they go to arbitration because there's just way too much stuff. Or
Explain that to me in a settlement agreement. What does it say?
so essentially that the parties are going to work together to divide the property to their mutual satisfaction. However, if they're unable to reach a resolution on X item, whatever on the items, then they'll subject themselves to arbitration. They'll split the cost, and the arbitrator will make the decision.
And what I write in is, if we're dividing property and it's more than the target limit, then I'm gonna write in, Lewis Tesser, Bruce Steinfeld.
Yeah, I'm gonna write somebody in.
And if it's target stuff, Annie Mulligan. Hey, Annie, love you.
Shout out to Annie.
Love you, Annie. Okay, I'm just kidding, Annie. Okay, last thing. When you're writing settlement agreements and you're enumerating property, should you enumerate it or be vague?
Enumerate it for sure.
Especially if the property is what?
If it's common property, if it's something they have multiple of,
There you
or
go.
something like that.
TVs.
Right.
You know what I like to do with that? Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, unless they have already separated and that there is really no question about that here, husband's in this new house, wife is in the old house, and he's already moved all of his stuff out. Unless there is absolutely nothing left in that house, you gotta identify it.
Right. And the last thing I tell my client is like, okay, you're about to make your deal. You're going to live by your deal. This goes for the whole deal. But then I say about property, do not, if you made your deal and you're good, I'm happy, but do not call me tomorrow and go, oh, I forgot about this thing and that thing, because now it's an act of diplomacy. Now it's over and you're asking. You're not negotiating. You're asking, which you could just do by yourself. You don't even need me. So do you guys do that with your clients? Say,
Or say just buy a new one.
depending on how,
But when I write agreements, when we're talking about whether or not you're going to be vague, I like to be as specific as the, master bedroom, bed, frame, mattress, because people are going, what do you quantify as the bed? And then, okay, the TV, this brand TV in this room, or something like that. That way there's no question of which LG TV we're talking about. Oh, well, I meant the 65-inch, not the 45, but that's what was in, So as specific as you can be, can be much better.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on pots and pans, y'all?
Yeah.
Just I'm sorry.
I have a funny story. Not so funny since it was my client, but I represented the wife. The husband was supposed to get all his power tools out of the garage, and wife gave him what there was in the garage, and he said, well, you didn't give me everything. I'm missing this stuff. And she's like, well, I don't have that stuff. And he's like, well, wait a second. I saw your storage unit. You have that stuff. She's like, no, that's stuff that I bought after the divorce. And he's like, no, it wasn't. So we go back and forth. And this is up in Floyd County. And the judge ordered, and this is like on a July day, ordered me, opposing counsel, and the two parties to go to the wife's storage unit and had the wife pull everything out. And sure enough, it was all husband's stuff.
And you represented the husband?
No, the wife.
The wife?
Yeah.
Oh, not looking too good there.
No,
Oh, boy.
it was an awkward day.
Okay, to sum all this up, Jimmy wanted me to finish the story, the pots and pans story I told earlier, where we actually litigated cookware in a DeKalb County courtroom. A year or so after that case happened, I was talking at an event with then state court judge Dax Lopez, who's now in private practice in personal injury, but he was a very good state court judge. And I was talking to him at an event, and I said, Dax, you really got to get on the Superior Court. And he's like, nah, man, I'm not doing it. They got divorces and stuff up there, and I'm not getting into arguments about cookware and pots and pans and stuff. And I said, Dax, that's a very rare thing. Now, Dax was a state court judge in DeKalb County. And if you remember earlier, my story was about Judge Scott's courtroom in DeKalb County. So he said, no, Steve, he says, like a year and a half ago, I had a day off, and I walked over to Superior Court just to watch a divorce trial, and there were these two attorneys arguing about pots and pans, and they had them all lined up on the bar there. He was talking about the exact same case that I just talked about, my case. And I said, dude, that was my case. He goes, I'm never going to do it. I said, you have to understand how rare that is. He said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to.
Way to go. You just ruined the judge.
You ruined him.
I ruined it.
You ruined
You
him.
broke a judge.
I broke a judge, yes. All right. Shewmaker and Lewis, pots and pans. Peace out, y'all.
Woo!